Chapter 5. The Unit. I wake up in the morning and a fly makes a hole in my neural field. Disorganized, I employ a tactic to fill the gap. I feel mild tension, and the neighbor's dog barks and whines, all because a fly made a hole in my neural field. In reality, that dog, the fly, and I are one, I tell myself as I recover. The dog barks when I get nervous, my hand moves when I give it a command. My hand and my body form a unit, just like the dog and the hole in my field. When Pachita operates, she, her brother, and the patient form a single unit. In reality, Pachita operates on herself when she grafts a kidney, she impales herself when she uses her hunting knife. On July 12, I arrived at 7:30 p.m. I heard patient number 33 waiting for his turn. 60 people were on the list for consultations and 16 for surgery. The building was so crowded that I had to wait 30 minutes to get in. I prayed Dr. M wasn't there, and then I saw him go outside to smoke a cigarette and throw it on the wet ground in the courtyard. Why do I dislike him so much? I wondered. Surely it's a test to measure my capacity for love. Z appeared in the doorway and invited me in. The brother was talking to someone. I felt the energy of the room and stood by the curtain. If there was an eye case, it was always given priority, and that day was no exception. 4 eye patients were to be treated on that occasion. A white chair was placed next to the operating bed, and Dr. M stood on the brother's left side, while Lick Y stood on the right. The latter was in charge of the knife. He cleaned it, held it, and offered it to the brother whenever he asked for it. "Sit down, my beautiful boy," the brother welcomed a completely nearsighted 35-year-old man. "What's wrong with my little boy?" The man didn't know about his brother's existence. "Pachita," he said in a pleading voice, "I can barely see. Could you help me?" The brother took the knife and placed its tip against the man's left eye. While he scraped and penetrated the eyeball, he asked about the patient's vision. "Can you see better, my loving child?" A little bit, Pachita." The knife had penetrated the eyes without an exclamation of pain from the man. It was impressive to see the delicacy of her eyes and the penetration of that hunting knife into them. That knife really isn't what it seems, I thought at that moment. It wouldn't even be necessary to use it. "Take those cotton balls," Dr. M told the man after the operation. "Place them over your eyes and walk out with your head tilted back. Come in, my loving brother," the brother said to the next patient. Another man, led by 2 companions, was led to the brother's side. "On behalf of my father, I greet you. I answered to you in the same name," the brother replied. "What's the matter?" "I can hardly see anything, brother. My left eye is gone, and my right eye is dull and lightless." "Well, sit down, my darling, and let's see what we can do." The brother's hand asked for the knife. He inserted the point into the patient's left orbit despite the patient's protests. "But there's no eye there, little brother." "Look, my boy, the absence of one eye means the healthy one can't see. Let's first completely close the left eye, and that will correct the poor vision in the right eye." The brother inserted a knife 5 centimeters into the left eye, and, with firm lateral movements, cut. He then called for a flashlight and held it to his right eye. I was amazed to see a complete absence of blood after the terrible wound caused by the knife insertion on the left side. "What do you see, my darling?" "I see light," the man replied. "Yes, well, but what else do you see?" "I see some shadows but no details," the patient replied again. "Let's see, my darling, let's see." The brother's hand lashed out with his right eye. The tip of the knife was thrust in and turned several times. "Now what do you see?" "I see better, brother. In truth, I can make out more details." "Go, my good man, and take care of that eye. Come back in 30 days for another operation." As before, his eyes were covered with cotton, and the man walked away guided by his companions. The third patient was an elderly man with completely grey hair. "Sit down, my sweet boy," his brother said, offering him the chair. "What's wrong with my little boy?" "My eyes are full of tears and I can never see anything clearly." "We'll fix that in a moment, my beautiful boy. Don't worry anymore." Again the knife was introduced, but now the movement seemed to scrape the glassy surface of the external ocular tissue. A flashlight was lit, and the man smiled broadly. "I see much better now," he said. The electric light was never turned on in the operating room. A window next to the operating bed was always covered with a striped sheet, preventing visibility of the courtyard from inside and the room from outside. The left side of the room was dedicated to altars, flowers, candles, and votive candles, surrounded by figures of Cuauhtémoc and placed on steps. Christ was protected by a cloth curtain that was closed at the beginning of the procedures and opened during consultations. The only light in the room was a candle lit on that altar. The last eye patient that night was a very elegantly dressed gentleman. "Brother," he said clearly, "I have a pituitary tumor pressing on my optic nerve. Every day I'm losing more and more of my sight. Lately, the entire right side of my eye has been dark. My left eye sees fine, but my right eye has a shadow on the right side. The doctors say I'll soon lose my sight completely. Let's see, my boy, let's see what we can do." Cotton pads were placed over the eyes. The right eye was partially uncovered, and the brother operated on it. It was a case of acromegaly, and what was wrong was the pituitary gland, not the eye, I thought at the time. Surely inserting the knife into the eye will do something to the pituitary gland, or there will be no improvement. After maneuvering with the knife, the flashlight was lit again, and the right corner of the right eye was illuminated. "I see, brother, the shadow has completely disappeared." We all rested while the patient was brought out, and I settled into my place opposite brother on the operating bed. Z remained by my side, and Dr. M by brother's side. Z seemed sad. I asked him, and he told me that the staff had been fired from the factory where he worked and felt sorry for them. Brother had sat down in his chair and was talking to her. There was a slight change in the tone of his voice. Brother seemed angry or annoyed. I approached, and in a whisper he said to me, "I see you have left your investiture outside and that you have given me your heart." I was astonished. It was true that I had begun to love Pachita and respect my brother, that I felt that my faith had been restored, and that I had been accepted and shown the unlimited without being asked to leave my body. But what investiture was he talking about? Upon entering the enclosure, I always underwent a change. I felt relaxed and attentive, experiencing a connection with the divine, and respecting and loving the work and endeavors being carried out there. The brother connected me with the familiar and the human, and all my knowledge and skills were subordinated to his help. That meant leaving my investiture outside? I didn't know, nor did I imagine, that that night I would see the unimaginable, and at the same time experience terrible humiliation. I didn't know that the day after that night, I would experience the true fear of Jehovah, and that my thoughts would disappear, leaving in their place utter anguish and emptiness. I calmed Z down and tried to ignore the tension Dr. M was accustomed to creating, preparing for the first patient. A young man dressed in a suit and tie walked in, accompanied by his wife. I asked him his name and asked him to hold my hand and squeeze it if I felt pain, and suddenly I realized he was completely deaf. His wife spoke for him, confirming my observation. "Fausto was born," she said nervously, "with congenital deafness in one ear, and a year ago he lost the other. Now he can't hear anything. Lie down, my darling." the brother indicated with his hands. I grabbed his head as the brother inserted the knife into his left ear. He seemed to be searching for something, moving the knife around and around. Finally, in a triumphant tone, he said, "Here it is, I found the snail." Obviously, he was referring to the cochlea in the inner ear. Observed the knife penetration and calculated the distance from the cochlea to the outer ear, verifying that they matched. I didn't wonder if the eardrum had been pierced. The chain of ossicles in the middle ear had been pierced. The brother is capable of reaching the cochlea directly and without causing any damage along the way, I trusted. The knife seemed to maneuver inside the cochlea. The patient was vibrating with pain, almost overwhelming my efforts to hold his head still. Finally, the knife stopped moving, and the brother brought his mouth close to his ear and shouted, "Fausto, do you hear me? Fausto!" The patient did not answer, and again. The brother turned to his wife and asked her to speak to her husband. With a flashlight shining over his mouth, he had Fausto read his lips. "If it hurts, say it. If you hear something, tell us." The brother continued maneuvering with his knife, and after a while, he said he wanted to try the other ear. I turned my head, and the maneuver of inserting and searching for the cochlea was repeated. Fausto still couldn't hear despite all his brother's efforts. "I'm going to graft a new snail," he said suddenly. Without knowing where it had come from, I saw a small bone in the brother's hand. He put it in his ear and pushed it in with the tip of the knife. He put his mouth close to my ear and asked, "What's your name?" "Faust," the man replied. We all turned to look at each other and smiled. "Speak to him, Brother Jacob." I approached him and asked if he could hear us. "He's nervous," said the brother, "but he can hear." We plugged his ears with cotton and said goodbye. His wife thanked us and left the room. Then they brought in a boy who also had hearing problems, but we couldn't keep him still. The brother decided not to have surgery and asked his mother to continue giving him the medicine she had prescribed and to bring him back another day after calming him down. The next patient was a young friend of M, one of Pachita's sons. Extremely nervous, she clung to M's hand, begging him not to leave her. Jokingly, M tried to calm her down until her brother intervened in a gentle manner. "Come on, my sweet girl, relax, nothing is going to happen to you." It was a case of an appendix that needed to be removed. The brother firmly inserted the knife and made a 15-centimeter opening in the patient's side. I watched his maneuvers fascinated and tried not to be distracted by Dr. M's negativity. For some reason, in his presence, everything transformed from magical to mundane, from wonderful to routine, from incredible to vernacular. Also, for some strange reason, the wounds weren't saturated during his presence, and the patients bled and complained more. Z was puffing beside me, probably thinking the same thoughts I was trying to push out of my mind. "Look, Brother Jacob," the brother called to me, pointing to an elongated piece of tissue he had just removed from his side. "Is it the appendix?" I asked. "Yes, my loving boy, the same one." I decided to saturate and asked Dr. M to remove his hands, which were preparing to bandage the patient's abdomen. My request was denied, and in a fit of rage, I grabbed the doctor's hands and pulled them away with a swift, intense movement, saturated, and then bandaged. "But what?" Dr. M rebuked me cynically. "Do you also cure?" "You should be ashamed of yourself for expressing a doubt in this room," I told him. Dr. M stepped back from the operating bed, and in a furious and extremely emotional cry, he yelled, "I've never seen such disrespect. I've never doubted the brother, but I do doubt you. I know you and I know who you are, and you can't cure him." After saying that, he left the premises, and we continued to hear his screams in the courtyard. "Forgive them," the brother said to the recently operated woman. "Forgive them." Z looked at me with a knowing air, and I noticed a smile on Pachita's face. "Come in, my beautiful girl," the brother said to an extremely slow-moving young woman. "Let's fix that sweet little head, my sweet girl. Lie down, my little girl." I was about to witness something that would surpass anything I had ever seen, something incredible and wonderful. The woman lay down and, without showing any sign of pain, let the hunting knife penetrate the back of her head. With it, the patient was trepanned, and then the knife penetrated her brain. With a lateral and then extractive movement, an entire area of cortex was removed. I stared at it in astonishment and realized its dimensions. Approximately 7 centimeters long and 3 centimeters thick, that bloody mass covered in convolutions on the table next to Cuauhtémoc's body. From a plastic bag, the saint's hand extracted a tissue resembling the amputated one. Fresh in appearance and rosy in hue, a slice of bark filled the brother's hands. Like a newborn baby, the brother rocked the tissue and spoke to it with loving words. "Live, live, live," he said, and then inserted it into the gap left by the missing bark. In a second, similar maneuver, another piece of brain was grafted. Immediately afterward, the brother's mouth approached the trepanation, and he spoke to it, comforted it, and breathed into it. I saturated and bandaged her head completely. I observed the woman and asked her how she felt. "I'm fine, little brother, very fine." We covered her with the sheet and took her to rest. My God, my God, my God, I couldn't stop saying my God, as a new patient entered the room. She was an elderly, very obese woman complaining of severe back pain. I had already seen several spinal surgeries, including those called fluid surgeries. In these, cerebrospinal fluid was injected from the base of the spine. In this operation, the brother used a technique that revived an image from my childhood. Using a glass speaker saturated with alcohol, the brother lit it on fire and immediately placed it at the base of the spine. The vacuum created caused a bubble-like excrescence of skin to appear, penetrating the beaker. With the knife, Cuauhtémoc's hand opened the back a few centimeters above the beaker, uncovered the vertebrae, and before grafting a bone onto them, he requested that the patient's legs be placed at the same length and horizontal plane. I saturated the wound, and after the patient was taken away, I asked the brother about the procedure. "It's to prevent bleeding," he told me quickly. I had seen a similar maneuver at my maternal grandfather's house, and the memory of several glasses placed in the back, pulling at the flesh, had remained in my mind as a vision of something very strange. They immediately brought in an old woman. Her hair was completely white and her body extremely flabby. She took the bed, lying face down. Her brother greeted her with his usual affection, and despite having heard it so many times, I felt a great tenderness when I heard him call that little old lady little girl. I thought I noticed on her face a return to childhood, and a total trust in that woman who had suddenly revived a dead mother. "My leg hurts a lot," the old woman told her brother. "My femur is in very bad shape. Don't worry, my darling, you'll see how things will turn out." After the previous words, the hunting knife penetrated the thigh and exposed the bones. With a saw, Cuauhtémoc began scraping the bone tissue. It sounded like the scraping of sandpaper on rough wood. Finally, something was directed inside the leg, and the operation was complete. The next patient came from the town of Parral. A plump, well-built woman, accompanied by her husband, lay face down on the bed. We uncovered her back while her husband explained that in a previous operation brother had removed a lung cancer, but the patient continued to cough and have severe respiratory problems. "Look, my loving little wife," brother said to the woman. "Your cancer is cured, and you haven't understood. When you think you're sick, your body gets sick. You're fine now. We're going to correct the discomfort you're feeling with another operation, but you must cooperate. Don't think you're sick and you'll stop having discomfort." "Yes, brother, I promise." Next, a large incision was made on the left side, and then, with the help of the knife, a large dark organic mass was removed. "We're going to insert a new lung," said brother, taking a whitish piece of tissue he extracted from a plastic bag. He placed the tissue on the tip of the knife and inserted it into the cavity. With a barely audible whisper, the grafted lung took the place of the removed one. I paid close attention to the patient's breathing and noticed no change throughout the entire surgical procedure. I saturated and realized I didn't know how long I should do it before removing my hands. Every time I had saturated, an inner voice had told me the time, but now I wanted to see it. I placed my hands over the wound, and the moment the voice told me to, I separated them and lifted the cotton ball I always placed on the skin. The huge incision was completely closed, and there was no blood or visible scarring. I turned to my left and saw Dr. M walk in, holding a patient's hand. During the brain operation, the cortical tissue that had been removed and placed on the small table next to the brother's chair had disappeared. A strange power had disintegrated it, leaving no trace of its previous presence. Exactly the same thing had happened to the removed lung. I was no longer surprised by these disappearances and the complementary materializations I had observed. In fact, in the months prior to my meeting with Cuauhtemoc, I had been fine-tuning my Sintergic theory of the space-matter continuum. In this theory, I considered matter to be the low synergy end of the continuum, defining it fundamentally as the set of points containing more or less concentrated information, and with greater or lesser redundancy. Matter was the least convergent, and had the least redundancy, while space was capable of containing, at each of its points, colossal amounts of information with high redundancy. The brain was an instrument of interaction with the synergistic structure of space through the activation and subsequent expansion of energy fields. The intersection between these neural fields and the organization of space, in addition to creating experience, affected space in every synergistic sense, decreasing or increasing synergy. Thus, a neural field morphology could decrease the synergy of space, and thus materialize an object, or conversely, increase it, resulting in dematerialization. Other entities could do the same. In this way, it was understandable that I accepted what I saw, and also organized rather than disorganized my thoughts. However, seeing the disappearance of brain tissue, or the materialization of a kidney, a bladder, or a portion of the cerebral cortex had the charm and mystery of complexity and specificity. A beautiful American girl, a patient of Dr. M, of great stature, beautiful bearing and affectionate gaze, took her place on the operating bed. Constant contact with the miracles performed by the brother had changed my point of reference, and a total faith in God and penetration into the different levels and scales of consciousness were becoming a daily companion of my thoughts. I remembered Don Lucio and his favorite disciple. The former did not need to enter a mediumistic trance to speak with spirits and disembodied beings. I learned the technique, and when we had the opportunity, we checked our vibrational perceptions and were amazed at the concordance of subtle sensations that different places provoked in both of us. "Brother," said Dr. M, "this is a case Dr. V sent you. Some time ago this girl injured her right ankle and underwent conventional surgery. The result was not very positive. She is unable to perform certain foot movements without experiencing intense pain." The brother's face changed for a moment, and I managed to glimpse a subtle intention on his forehead. "But I don't know anything about ankles and muscles and tendons," he suddenly said to Dr. M. He was surprised, and with a slight movement of his shoulders, he was about to accept the confession as valid. Surely there was a terrible struggle within this man, and finally what he had witnessed overcame his natural state of doubt. "You know more than I do," the brother continued, clearly mockingly. "No, brother," Dr. M replied. "How could you not know?" "Well, we'll try." I had taken the girl's hand while the brother's hand ran over her ankle and detected the damage. "The tendon is bad," he said suddenly, "and the muscle insertion is too stiff." With the knife he opened her ankle and began to manipulate its muscular and tendon structure. The girl breathed deeply, trying to ease the pain she was suffering. I tried to calm her by stroking her forehead and squeezing her hand. "Ask him if he can move his foot," brother told me. "Tell him to flex his leg, wiggle his toes, twist his foot." As the intervention continued, the movements were performed with increasing ease and without pain. Finally, Dr. M bandaged, and the girl asked me if they were finished, and if, in addition to fixing the tendon, they had released the muscle stiffness. "Don't worry," I replied. "Everything's fine." "You're wonderful," she said as I wrapped the sheets around her. A boy about 10 years old walked by right after. "Hello, my sweet little boy, what's wrong?" the brother asked. "I have a pain here," the boy said, pointing to his stomach. The mother explained that it was a hernia they hadn't been able to cure. The child lay on his back, and brother's hand began to examine his abdomen. He took my hand and made me feel a rigid growth located above my navel. "What hernia?" brother whispered to me. I placed cotton pads to limit the area, and the knife immediately opened an area about 25 centimeters wide in the abdomen. I paid close attention to the cut and noticed that Cuauhtémoc, in Pachita's body, seemed to exert no pressure or considerable effort, and that the subtle contact of the knife's metal blade against the skin was enough to open it. In less than a minute, a dark fetid tumor the size of a paddleball had been extracted from the young man's body. I hurried to saturate the wound, and again noted the absence of any traces of blood and the perfect union of the skin, leaving no trace of scar. How could he live with that for so long? "I don't understand," said the brother as he said goodbye to the sick boy. As I left the room, I noticed a sudden change in the energy level. I turned around, and at that moment, brother began to speak. "Now, my brothers," he said very seriously, "I want you to leave. The next case is serious, and I don't want to put you at risk." A patient lying next to the altar, having just undergone surgery, stood up at that moment and, carrying his sheet, fled the room. We all smiled and looked at each other. I started to walk away from the operating table toward the exit and invited Dr. M to do the same. The latter became enraged again and shouted at me that the brother's instructions did not apply to him, that he was helping with the damage. "Do you need my help too?" I asked the brother. He turned to me and said, "No, brother, this damage would destroy your mind." I waited in the courtyard, curious to know the outcome of this final intervention. After 10 minutes, I was invited into the room. Pachita's body was seated next to the altar, and brother was giving his usual instructions to the assistants. "Brothers," he told us, "we must forgive one another and not cause unpleasant disturbances." M approached him and told him that he should establish order, since his authority was the deciding factor. "Me?" the brother replied. "Me to meddle in worldly affairs? You're either here or you're there, and there's no middle ground." The prayer had been so clear and strong that we all remained silent. This was interrupted by the brother's farewell. Raising his right arm, he said goodbye to us. We surrounded Pachita, and with our palms open, and in her direction we protected her from the possible intrusion of a lower astral. The moment of her brother's farewell and Pachita's return to everyday consciousness was a very dangerous one, always provoking a state of tension and sustained attention. Within a few seconds, and after several muscle spasms, Pachita regained consciousness. As always, she stroked her hair and rubbed her eyes. She asked for balsamic liquid and rubbed it on her face, hands, hair and neck. I left Pachita's house with a very unpleasant feeling. It was incredible how I let myself get carried away by anger and how I fell in the presence of Dr. Ma. He had told me that I was forbidden to get angry when I left the premises, and I told myself the same thing until I got home. The brother had become upset by the lack of unity. Those of us who were helping him weren't up to the task. In the following days, I meditated on unity. The existence of entities like the brother, who seemed to have an independence and a life of their own, was so clear that it made me doubt. Finally, I returned to what I considered fundamental. We are one, and our body has no limits. Every manifestation is and comes from the same thing. In contemporary physics, a particle that is apparently separate from others is actually the intensification of a frequency range of the same and unique quantum field. The same thing happens with consciousness. Each consciousness comes from a global and unifying consciousness of the whole. Each being is on the path toward unity with the whole and undergoes different experiences to achieve it. The same thing happens in the brain. The frequency of the neural field increases with evolution. At a certain stage, the field merges and becomes indistinguishable from the structure of space. It becomes one with the latter, and thus individual consciousness establishes intimate contact with the absolute and undifferentiated. That's God, the only divinity of which we are all a part. His laws are the laws of the universe, and his structure is the Sintergic common to any organization. Chapter 6, Cuauhtémoc, July 14th, anniversary of the earthly birth of Cuauhtémoc. I arrived at Pachita's house, and for the first time saw the operating room illuminated. The curtain was drawn back, revealing the altar in all its magnificence. Hundreds of roses perfumed and colored the 7 steps of the altar. A magnificent painting of Cuauhtémoc on the left sheltered a carved image of Christ. Another Cuauhtémoc on the right served as a figure for a painting of Christ. The Aztec king saw himself full of power, and his gaze directed towards the sky and protected by a gigantic eagle, testified to his mysticism and his faith. Colored papers and a vase full of petals awaited Pachita's appearance. The dainty little girl in a wheelchair, the one who had suffered an overdose of anesthesia, also waited, looking at the flowers and her parents. Donna Candelaria, the person who knew the most about Pachita's work, hurried in and out arranging flowers and placing a white sheet over 3 chairs placed to the right of the altar. After a few minutes, Pachita arrived. She looked happy, but slightly tired. He greeted each of us waiting and sat in a chair placed in front of the altar. He asked for 3 people, who sat in the chairs to the right. Mrs. Yu approached me and told me that the woman who had sat in the center chair was very strange. At his sides, 2 of Pachita's former disciples also sat down and immediately closed their eyes. Something extraordinary is going to happen here, I thought thoughtfully. Surely these 3 people will intervene in some trance or energetic balancing. Pachita stood up from her chair and approached the altar, took a bright violet cloth full of bells and embroidery from ancient Mexico, and placed it on her shoulders like a tunic. He sat back down and the lights went out. Surely he is waiting for the brother, I thought. It is the moment when he takes possession of his body. We all waited in total silence for a few minutes, and suddenly, the woman sitting in the middle chair began to scream, after thrashing around violently. Her words came out so fast and in such a strange language that I couldn't understand anything she was saying. I'd heard Petra speak Mexican once, and the intonation was somewhat similar to that of hers. Seconds before Pachita also writhed, Doña Candelaria threw some rose petals at her. We all followed suit. Doña Candelaria had distributed the petals and told me to throw them the moment brother appeared. While Candelaria was singing some Mananitas songs with the help and participation of everyone, Pachita fell into a trance. I reproduce the innocent and beautiful song here. Mornings to little brother Cuauhtemoc. These are the mornings we came to sing to a divine spirit that comes from beyond, to this omnipotent being that the Lord sent us to give us advice and take away all evil from us. Come soon, blessed child. Come and console us, come. Give us your advice and to take away all evil. We are not worthy of your divine goodness, but you are eternal light in this earthly life. We all love you very much with all my heart. Don't leave us, little brother. Take us to the Creator. You were king in this land, you were great majesty, and now you are eternal light on the heavenly throne. Come soon, blessed child, come and console us, come give us your advice and to take away all evil. Surrounded by petals, Pachita's body twisted for a moment, then, with the brother's deep and certain voice, she greeted us. Dear brothers, he said first, I am very happy for your love. Even though my father forbade me to be with you, here I am, wanting not to disappoint you. Too many things have happened lately that aren't entirely satisfactory. A great and terrible catastrophe is looming, and today more than ever you should learn to love and give your all. Next to me, in her wheelchair, the under-anesthetized girl we'd operated on a few days earlier seemed to be listening to the voice of the message. She swayed in her chair, sometimes with her back erect, then bent completely over until her knees touched her forehead. Her little eyes jumped from the lit candle on the altar to the chair that held Cuauhtemoc's body. She remained completely silent, but suddenly, excited, she let out an exclamation of joy. The brother turned to look at her, and said he was finally getting it. The girl's exclamations were repeated several times whenever the brother spoke of love and devotion to God. However, she remained silent during the concrete descriptions or advice. It's incredible, I told myself. The girl is detecting the deepest abstractions and the most fundamental indications, and she doesn't respond to anything that pertains to the earthly world, to concrete descriptions and the mundane. Is it perhaps, I wondered, that what possesses the greatest power of abstraction is at the same time the most fundamental? Perhaps this girl's state of clear decortication has brought her into contact with God, and she only reacts to Him. The brother continued speaking about the need to give and love when he was interrupted by the medium sitting in the center chair. He spoke like an Indian child with little knowledge of Spanish, or like a very primitive being incapable of clear verbal expression. I love you very much, The brother turned to look at him and greeted him. You may stay, my loving child, you may be with us, but you may follow the laws of your kingdom and be in peace. I love you very much, I give you thanks. 2 days later, in morning meditation with my group, I had attempted to apply the brother's teaching to a dark entity that inhabits the house in which we meditate. Sensing her, I invited her to stay and receive light from us. To my disappointment, I wasn't able to communicate, and I lacked the strength to help her and overcome the emptiness she left me. The brother spoke for 10 minutes, delivering a discourse of such beauty and depth that I feel unable to reproduce it here. He mentioned that he himself was not a very elevated being, and that he was continually learning and wished to help his fellow humans with all his ability and strength, and with the help of his father. He spoke of his flesh, saying that it was very mischievous, and that she, Pachita, did not take proper care of herself. He blessed us and asked for light for all of us, and promised not to abandon the suffering of the species and to cooperate to bring light to the world. At the end, he asked us to resolve our passions and not let ourselves be carried away by hatred, misunderstandings, or anger. Then he opened the door for questions. The girl's mother approached her, kissed her hand, congratulated brother on his birthday, and thanked him for helping her daughter. "My dear child," brother replied, "your daughter will soon begin to walk and then talk. All of this is a test for you and your husband. You both have pure hearts, and when you manage to resolve your problem, you will reach the state that will allow you to approach the divine. Your daughter's illness was a test for you." "But why her?" the mother protested. "Why did they make her suffer?" "That's right, my dear girl, the Lord's paths are the most difficult to walk. But all will be happiness and health soon. Be patient and you will see." Weeping, the woman approached her daughter and husband. One by one, the 20 or so people who had attended the ceremony approached to congratulate brother. A middle-aged woman asked him to tell her about his life when he was an Aztec king. "Oh, my precious little girl, those memories are painful for me, but I'm going to tell you some things. We lived in paradise. The inhabitants of Tenochtitlan lived, like you, on rich soil. Beneath the earth, the diamonds, emeralds, and rubies that in my time filled the fields and plantations are still preserved. I was educated for the kingship, and from a very young age, my father taught me, with the help of the priests, to decipher the codices and administer justice. When I was 13, I took the throne. I remember they brought me a warrior whom I was to judge. I fasted for 3 days and then studied the codices. At night I dreamed, and in the early mornings I recalled my dreams, trying to find signs for the verdict. If he dreamed that it was raining, it meant that the man had to be imprisoned for 3 days and nights. If he dreamed of the sun, the verdict and sentence must be different. I didn't want to mistreat him or hurt him. Historians have made many mistakes in my biography. They say things that weren't true. Imagine, I, so tiny, arrived at the priest's compound to deliver a verdict and explain the reasons that had led me to it. But everything went well. They accepted me, and from that moment on I received a lot of help. One day my people fell ill. It had happened before. The first time many hundreds of years before, long before the arrival of the Spanish, some monks had come sailing across the sea from Atlantis and crossed our land. They brought us knowledge, but also illnesses. When I turned 33, I had a major difficulty, but I won't tell you about that. We knew many secrets of the earth and the sky. We knew of a liquid that, when used, could destroy entire mountains. Beware of the Pedregal de San Angel. That liquid is still present in its subsoil. But I don't want to talk about that either. We were good and knew how to read the stars and communicate with God. Then the Spanish came and my people suffered greatly. I never married or had children. I had a girlfriend, and my reign ended too soon. The description was long and full of images of a glorious and pure era. It reflected nostalgia simultaneously with purity. The woman thanked me for the story, and I remembered one of my stories, in which an extraterrestrial being describes a series of events to an extragalactic audience. But he doesn't describe them verbally, but rather through direct transmission of images. Here too, during Cuauhtémoc's story, I had seen rather than heard his descriptions. When he finished, brother prepared himself for more questions. I approached him and asked him about my life. I don't want to share what he told me, but I was amazed by its precision and accuracy. He spoke to me again about St. Andrew and thanked me for wishing him a happy birthday. "Thank you," I said, "for letting me see what I saw and for letting me write it down." After me, a young man who had undergone brain surgery by brother came up to congratulate him. He looked healthy and strong, his eyes literally glowing. At this moment, as I write, I have before me the memory of his gaze. I have truly never seen anything like those absolutely phosphorescent eyes. His son approached later. "Brother," he said, "I want to ask you a great favor. I want to ask you to take away the being who tried to poison my mother." There was an expectant silence, which was broken by a grave rebuke from the brother. "Never! The dark being comes to be rescued in the light. Your mother's body will withstand all the attacks, don't worry." Later I found out that someone had put arsenic in the salt in Pachita's house. I'm not actually sure that's what happened, but I was told about an attempted poisoning. I was shocked and didn't want to ask any more questions. Finally, the brother raised his right arm and said goodbye. I thought Pachita was going to regain her normal consciousness, but instead, and after a moment of trembling, another entity took over the saint's body. I remembered that it had once been mentioned that Pachita was an open channel and accepted any entity. The one who took possession of her body at that moment was a gypsy woman. "I'm a gypsy," she said, "and I can read hands. Who wants to know their fate?" Someone put out their hand, and the gypsy woman began to speak. "The problem with your wife will be resolved soon. You will receive a travel assignment, and that will help you in your business." Another hand was read immediately afterward. "Your family gives you joy, yet you are sad. You must accept your life and rejoice in what you have." I couldn't resist my curiosity and, placing myself behind the gypsy, I extended my right arm. The light, except for an oil lamp placed on the altar, was off. From 50 centimeters from the eye, no detail was perceptible. He took my hand and immediately said, "Israel, you have the marks of the apostolate. You are Andrew, and your teacher left an unanswered question. You return to give him the answer. Within you'll soon receive a surprise. You'll reach the pinnacle of fame. You've found yourself, and from now on, everything will be light for you." "Good Lord," I exclaimed, filled with emotion. "The question is the creation of experience and its foundations. That's why I came." A tall girl with big eyes and jet black hair extended her hand. "You were Egyptian, and on August 13th, you'll have to come talk to me. Don't forget." On August 13th, 1521, the conquest of Tenochtitlan was completed. The gypsy woman shouted, "Remind this woman of her appointment with me on August 13th. "But we're going to Paral," replied. "No matter, I must speak to her on August 13th. I don't remember anything else. There were so many hands, and so many other stories that my memory can't recall them all. Moments before the gypsy woman took possession of Pachita's body, the medium had begun to speak again. "I want to compose my paw to you. You leave me. I want you." Moments before the gypsy woman left, the medium extended her hand, and the gypsy woman told her that she was already convalescing, and that she saw no signs of illness. "I'm saying goodbye to you," the gypsy woman said afterward. Pachita's body convulsed, and another entity entered her. "We are like flowers that wither when we don't drink enough water. In the end, we find God." After the poem, the creature identified itself in an intense tone of voice as Bocanegra. The convulsions began again, and a sad young voice emerged from Pachita's mouth. "I want my Aunt Canda to come." She was referring to Donna Candelaria, and at that moment I realized it was Pachita's dead son. She had lost him in the riots of 1968 and had never forgotten him. Pachita's sadness had been so great that she had fallen ill and lost her sight. The dead son continued speaking. "I love you and miss you. Take care of my mother and don't let her suffer." The ceremony was over, and Pachita returned to her consciousness. She asked for balm and greeted us in her simple village language. I asked Dona Candelaria for the lyrics to the Mananitas, and after much searching, Pachita showed us where some copies were. While someone else was looking for them, I brought me the hunting knife, and I saw it for the first time in sufficient light. The handle was covered and wrapped with black electrical tape, and the blunt, pointless blade had an engraving of an Indian with a headdress. It resembles Cuauhtémoc, I thought, but more so the silver statue of the patriarch A had brought for the altar. I returned the knife after feeling it and approached Dona Candelaria. The woman, with round, bright brown eyes, protruding teeth, medium height, and a quick, intelligent, and sure-footed gait, offered me atole and some tamales she had prepared for the ceremony. I asked her to sing the Mananitas to me again, and she did so in a fresh voice. Everyone admired Candelaria and considered her a kind of absolute expert on the brothers' mysteries. She rarely spoke, and kept her secrets to herself. There's also a goodbye song, he told me, suddenly feeling sad. I feel like crying when I remember it because we sang it when my mom was dying. I reproduce the lyrics here, to say goodbye to little brother. Goodbye, beautiful Cuauhtémoc, Emperor of Heaven, you bring us comfort and you take away all evil from us. How sad pilgrim, I continue wandering, you extend your hand to us to follow the Lord. Cuauhtémoc was his name, and history recorded it, and for his great effort glory conquered. You divine spirit, the Lord commanded it, so that you can give us advice and take away all evil from us, reproduce everything. You didn't see anything, Em told me. You certainly didn't see anything. A man once came to us whom brother operated on as a drunk. He came and said he'd been hit by a truck while drunk. He recommended that we drink lightly, just in case. I interrupted him. Would you agree to record some of what you saw? Sure, whenever you want. I arrived to say goodbye to Pachita. I told her I was going to visit her in Parral and that 3 friends wanted to come with me. They're very powerful people, and I'm sure they'll have doubts, but they've insisted so much that I came to ask you. You see what happened with G, he replied. He doesn't love me anymore, he hasn't spoken to me again. They are psychoanalysts, one is J, the director of an institute, and the other, M, does clinical work. Look, Pachita, I wouldn't like them to doubt you, and that's why I'm asking you. Oh, little brother, I'm not scared anymore, I've been through a lot. If you want, bring them. Hey, he said to me before we said goodbye. Isn't it true that the more power people have, the more spoiled they become? Yes. Chapter 7, The Beings. I arrived at Pachita's house feeling exhausted. I parked in front of the market and meditated to process all my unresolved issues. I used all the techniques I know to achieve silence and connect with my being. I finally succeeded and thus entered the operations room. It was Wednesday, and I was delighted not to see Dr. M later. I learned that he had angrily declared that he wouldn't return to help until the negative people, that is me, had left Pachita. His latest tantrum had been to accuse the saint's close associates of being thieves. Lying face down on the operating bed was a friend of Z's. His right leg was 2 centimeters shorter than his left. I was asked to pull on his right heel while brother made an incision near his spine. I felt my leg stretch, and as I helped bandage it, I was introduced to a new collaborator of brothers. He was incredibly strong, and later, when I saw his face, he reminded me of someone who I met him a long time ago. He looked like a mixture of a Roman soldier and Peter. On behalf of my father, I greet you, I said to brother after finishing the operation. I answer you in the same name, he replied with his usual sweetness. How are your friends? He asked me next. I haven't seen them, I said. Well, thank God. A middle-aged woman immediately took the table. I positioned myself to the left of the new assistant and asked him to give the patient energy. "What's wrong with my sweet girl?" "A hernia, Pachita, a hernia. But I don't know where it is." "Where does it hurt?" "Well, here next to the navel and also on the side and up here." "But my girl," brother jokingly said, "I'm not going to operate on you in every place, are I?" After touching the abdomen, the Bowie knife penetrated the patient's side. After a brief effort, something was cut and a dark tissue was extracted from the wound. "What you had was a bad appendix," the brother told the woman. "But look, we've already removed it." It had been an easy and almost painless operation. I saturated the wound, which closed immediately, and after bandaging the abdomen, the new assistant carried the patient as if she weighed nothing. "Brothers," the brother began to tell us after they took the woman away. "Brothers, I want to make a request of you. They're going to bring a little woman who has great faith in us and who has come from very far away. Please, let us pray to the Father so that we may help her." This must be a very difficult case, I thought immediately, and was tempted to ask for the diagnosis, but halfway through my sentence, a very reserved gentleman accompanied by his wife. "Lie down, my sweet and loving girl." The woman lay down, and we uncovered her belly. It was tremendously swollen. I took her hand and began stroking her forehead, while I placed dry cotton balls to delimit the surgical field. "Let's pray," Brother A asked again. After examining her abdomen, Brother A asked for scissors, with which he cut the patient's side. Then he inserted the knife and twisted it, widening the incision. He held it motionless for a few seconds and then asked for a light. Flashlight was turned on, and I saw a terrible gash from which blood was gushing forth. "I need to close that vein," Brother A said. "Keep the light on." In a moment, he maneuvered the knife and the blood stopped gushing. From the table to his right, he took some tissue and asked A to pour some liquid into the wound. Suddenly, something fell from inside the patient's body, and with a triumphant voice, Brother A announced that he had managed to extract the rotten part of the liver. He then asked me to press lightly on the abdomen and place 2 large lumps of tissue over the wound. I recognized that they were pieces of liver. With the tip of the knife, he inserted them into the open cavity and then asked me to saturate the wound. I did it with all my might, and in the light of the flashlight, I could see how the wound closed without a trace, practically swallowing up the tissue. Now I'm going to ask everyone to carefully lift this sweet little girl and place her on her side. With A's help, that's what we did. The brother's hand took the knife again and inserted it into the skin. He did a quick one and I was tense and held back. I prayed and worried. It entered the opening of about 10 centimeters. He asked Doña Candelaria for a doll. "Give me a doll, quickly," she said. In the midst of my surprise, I saw Cande take a dry cotton ball and make a ball with it. Him. That was the wrist that Brother's hand had inserted into the wound. The woman complained bitterly, and I asked her to pray aloud. "Our Father who art in heaven, praised be thy name." For the next 5 minutes, the woman recited the most precise and accurate prayer I had ever heard. I hugged her, trying to soothe her pain. The brother's hand placed another piece of tissue over the wound. Its color was deep red and elliptical in shape. The skin was open, with the tissue over it. I turned to look at the woman's face, and immediately the incision and before my eyes the light from the flashlight illuminated the surgical field. The tissue disappeared, and seconds later the wound closed. Despite having seen a similar phenomenon so many times, this one was so clear and dramatic that I felt tremendous emotion. The brother asked me to saturate, even though the wound had closed on its own, and I obeyed. Saturating, I told myself, is not only closing the wound but also sending energy into the body. We bandaged the woman, and after they took her away, I asked the brother if the terrible swelling in her belly was a pregnancy. No, he told me, it's the result of very advanced cancer. What follows is harm, the brother said in a deep voice. An elderly man from Netzahualcoyotl city entered the room. He was asked to lie on his back, and just as El had asked me not to be distracted, I did the same with the new assistant. Don't get distracted for a single second, I told him, feeling like his protector. What's wrong with you, man of God? The brother asked him. Where is that animal that you feel moving inside your body? Here, the man said, pointing to the left side of his leg, next to his penis. That's from being with too many women, the brother said to the patient. We laughed, and I asked for cotton. With the knife, the brother's hand opened the flesh and began to cut inside. The man groaned terribly. His screams pierced me, and I thought the woman was much more resistant to pain than the man. The brother asked me to insert my hand into the cavity, and with his hand, he made me touch a very hard tissue embedded inside the body. Do you want me to hold it? I asked him immediately. No, Brother James. That would sting terribly. Efforts to extract the damage continued while the man continued to complain horribly. Finally, the damage was extracted and placed on a black piece of paper held by I asked him, did you also see how the tissue disappeared on the woman? That woman, he replied, had very advanced cancer. The operation was multiple. Her liver and pancreas were repaired, and a new gallbladder was grafted. You must remember, he continued, that an entire team of surgeons is assisting brother. When the tissue was placed on the skin, they inserted it from the inside, closed the wound, and began to tie off the tiny internal ducts. I stopped talking for a moment, and as if he had suddenly remembered something, he continued, the surgical work doesn't end with the operation. The beings continue working on the grafts, ligating ducts, providing energy, and restoring and strengthening the cells. The brother sat in a chair next to the altars, and, as we circled around him, he quickly said goodbye to us all with his customary gesture of raising his right arm in a martial manner. The session had ended, and I approached Dona Candelaria. Cande, I said, you see more than we do, don't you? I see that around your hands there are other hands. The truth is, I only see the sick man's body without clothes in those hands. I barely see your hands, or Pachita's. Those other hands shine brighter and always scare me. That's why, as you can see, I don't go near them. And what are those hands like? They have long fingers and they shine. Do you use instruments? Yes, they cut and saturate and stop the blood, and they're very fast. The truth is, your hands are occupied by those brilliant hands, and I know that when you move a finger, they're the ones doing it, but you don't realize it. Pachita, she doesn't either, he's too fast. For some reason I remembered the blood-soaked sheet from the cancer treatment, and the sudden disappearance of the tissue over the incision, and how it had closed before my eyes. Those beings, I thought, are the ones who operate, and it is a whole team that has reached absolute and total perfection. Dona Candelaria continued telling me. One day, many years ago, I became curious to see my brother. I asked him to show me his body, and during an operation, I began to see it. It was like a flash, and I was so scared that I asked him to stop showing himself. I only managed to see his legs. They looked like two logs and were shiny and silver. He made fun of me, and he asked me why he first asked and then didn't want to see anymore. You won't believe this, but one day brother told us he needed a vine for an operation. I was very young then, and my sister and I went to Chapultepec to look for the vine. But neither of us knew what a vine was. Suddenly, brother appeared to me, dressed like an ordinary gentleman, and said, Vineyards are like ropes that hang from trees. Look, like that one. You know how we women are. He was so handsome and so strong that I forgot about the vine, and together with my sister, I began chasing him all over Chapultepec, just because I was a woman and he was a man. Suddenly, we were getting closer when, poof! He disappeared. Yes, right there in the middle of Chapultepec. He scared us so much that we ran to look for the vine. When we got here, brother scolded us, but not in body, but in spirit, through Pachita. He told us, look at these women who forget the commandments. My husband came to help us, but he was a heavy drinker. Sometimes he made fun of me and told me I was just seeing visions. I was 6 months pregnant. One day brother said that as a sign and to stop me from doubting, he was going to make my baby disappear. I told my husband, and he kept making fun of me. He said they were just thoughts and that I was crazy. Well, you won't believe me, but one night in this very room I felt dizzy, and after a while, I realized I no longer had anything in my belly. He made it disappear, and it disappeared. Since that day, my companion hasn't helped us again. I approached to say goodbye to Pachita, and she told me that she had gone to ask G for money, and that he had refused her. Really? I asked, alarmed. No, man, although those who have should give to those who don't have. That? Yes, they sell it to me for 15,000 pesos and I want to have it here in the house. Pachita turned to look at Z and said, lend me the money, go on, don't be mean. I won't lend it to you for the lion, Z replied. Imagine if he gets hurt and gets out of his cage and eats us all. Well, they deserve it, Pachita replied. Well, she said after thinking it over, maybe it wouldn't be a very good idea for me to buy a lion. I don't want to buy a lion anymore. We all laughed, and I said goodbye to that incredible woman. On the way out, the woman with the appendix asked me to take her home. She, 2 companions, and one of Pachita's assistants went out onto the street. There was a full moon, and the city welcomed us. That Dr. M, the assistant, suddenly said to me. He accused me of being a thief, and he also thinks he's Pachita's boss. If my parents hadn't taught me to respect older people, I would have hit him. I didn't want to hear anything more about that doctor. I took them to his house and then went back to mine slowly, enjoying the cool of the night and savoring the images I had seen during the day. The next day, everyone would go to Parral. Pachita would greet her chorus and bring them gifts. I remembered that the saint's assistant had told me about the clinic in Parral. When we went there, he told me very seriously, we worked hard. The bad thing is that they are very strong there, and when it's dark we have to. Solid. At night we hear footsteps and things falling. The only one who can stand it is E, and he helps his mom a lot. I decided to go to Parral too and learn about the work with the Cora Indians.